Check. Just making sure my audio level is correct here. I don't really know. Hi, the only person in my chat. Can you actually hear me? I'm assuming no. Hello? Can anyone hear me out there? Yes, Robert Brooks says yes, they can hear me. Is it need to be louder, quieter? This is literally my first time doing a stream, so bear with me here, guys. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the 2 commenters. So if anybody out there listening, watching hasn't heard already, currently what's happening is um, John Bolton's first day as Trump's national security advisor. We're having all of these things coalescing in a horrifying way very quickly here. And the most recent breaking news is just more scary, sort of World War III like ramping up. And give me 1 second. I'm just going to find the actual source of this report because it's only been reported in one official news source so far. So CNN Turkey, which I didn't even know there was CNN in Turkey, is reporting that the USS Donald Cook, the most likely ship to launch a TLAM strike against Syria, is being harassed by Russian fighter jets currently. And some other reports are also saying that it is about 100 miles off of the coast of Syria right now. There haven't been any verifications of this report that I found yet. And Google Translate is doing a really shit job of translating this Turkish article. So I'm not even going to attempt to really read it to you. It's very short, though. I mean, essentially, it's saying that 4 times Russian fighter jets have buzzed this ship, the USS Donald Cook. And it's just kind of a shitty coincidence, I guess, that while Trump is in charge, we have an aircraft carrier with his first name on its way to Syria to launch these airstrikes. So very scary situation happening right now. I have to leave in about 20 to 30 minutes to make dinner, but I just wanted to do this today because on Media Roots, we already have 2 episodes already done that are in the pipeline that are going to come out very soon. And neither of them are about this situation. So, yeah, if anybody has any breaking information or anything that they know, any more details about this aircraft carrier on its way to Syrian territorial waters right now, please say it in the chat, provide a link or anything like that. I'm checking Twitter's live search results with an applet where I can see them coming in live. And I haven't seen anything new so far on this news. So hopefully it's some kind of false alarm, or hopefully it's just Trump doing more of his, dick wagging kind of maneuvers, and it's not going to actually amount to any real airstrikes. But what's really scary, on top of the fact that John Bolton is now whispering in Trump's ear in the White House on a daily basis, is the resistance movement, the neoliberals who've been egging on Trump to attack Assad and perform more military actions this whole time and to increase hostilities with Russia. They are now egging on Trump to do this. And I think that that's when things will become very, very scary, is if they sort of, and not saying that Trump is somehow able to be intimidated or pushed into doing this by the resistance class or the neoliberals. I'm more concerned about the whole apparatus. So if you go back to the George W. Bush administration, if you were old enough back then to remember what that was like, we had the full weight of our cultural landscape at the time, not just the mainstream media, but also television, films, so many things happening at that time that were directly in line with the George W. Bush administration's narrative of the war on terror and the Iraq War. But in between that period of 9/11 and the Iraq War, we had pretty much a full lockstep um, sort of propaganda apparatus that was honestly one of the scariest things that I've ever seen in my entire life. And the only reason it's gotten slightly better since then is because not everything is in lockstep anymore. But so what's happening right now though is that we're already seeing people like Howard Dean um, egging on Trump to punish in some way Assad and Putin for this alleged Ghouta chemical weapons attack that they're alleging came from Assad's forces. Now, other people have already raised the obvious point of why would Assad ever consider launching a chemical weapons attack um, right when the Trump administration announces pulling out of Syria? Apparently, and this was actually reported yesterday, um, Netanyahu called Trump personally on the phone after he announced that. And just keep in mind, this is not Trump announcing a policy change. He's not rolling out some kind of like thought out policy change. This to me appears that Trump is just like floating a proposal and is waiting to see how people will react to it to make an actual decision or to move forward on something. This goes along the lines of sort of the way he's conducted business in the past before he became president. To me, it doesn't seem like he was serious at all about actually pulling troops out of Syria. It may have just been something he impulsively wanted to say that day. It's really hard to tell with Trump sometimes of how much of this is actually planned out and how much of just him throwing shit to the wall to see what sticks. But it was reported yesterday that Netanyahu personally called Donald Trump on the phone and excoriated him over his statements about pulling troops out of Syria. So that might have had something to do with it. But my thinking is more in line with I don't think Trump really gives a shit either way. I think that he's in a corner right now, which makes him more dangerous than he was before. The Mueller investigation is closing in. They just raided the home and the office of Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen. This is getting closer and closer to him every day. And even though I personally don't believe that there was any real collusion between the Trump campaign or Trump administration and Russia, even though I think most of the Mueller investigation is a witch hunt, it's one of the few instances I agree with Donald Trump. There's no doubt in my mind that Trump had an affair with Stormy Daniels and that his lawyer made essentially an illegal campaign contribution by paying off Stormy Daniels to get her not to talk leading into the election. Blatantly illegal. I mean, and it doesn't take a genius, doesn't take Anderson Cooper or 60 Minutes to figure this out. It's just on paper, blatantly illegal. Now, if Michael Cohen or had to testify under oath or something like that, if it was between him going to jail and Trump sort of getting indicted over this illegal quote unquote campaign donation to pay off Stormy Daniels, then Michael Cohen's going to flip instantly. I can't imagine that he would still hold up that defense that, oh yeah, I paid the money out of my own pocket to silence Stormy Daniels. I did it as a favor to a friend. I have a feeling that's not going to hold up if Michael Cohen ends up getting actually indicted from this. So let's see. Somebody on the chat is saying reports of Russian A-50 early warning jets patrolling West and East Syria with fighter escorts. Okay. Obviously not a good sign. But the reason I'm bringing up Israel in this is because both the U.S. The Trump administration mostly, both the Trump administration and the Israeli government need a distraction right now. And I would argue more so Israel needs this distraction because the massacre that they were somehow pulling off in front of the world stage in Gaza for the last several days was unprecedented. They had killed over, by my last count, 31 Palestinians, unarmed protesters coming to the Gaza border. uh, just a couple of days after that journalist uh, was killed, clearly wearing a press vest by an Israeli IDF sniper, Israel started doing airstrikes in Syria. And those airstrikes occurred almost immediately after this alleged Ghouta chemical weapons attack that happened in Syria. At first, the Pentagon said they didn't know anything about them, and then eventually later in the day admitted that it was Israel. But the U.S. government is still denying that they have anything to do with any ongoing airstrikes in Syria right now. I'm just taking a look at the chat really quick to see if there's anything I should address in there. And I hope you guys don't judge me for wanting to smoke right now, because I'm extremely stressed out. I mean, this is one of the scariest days in the Trump administration so far, besides the day that it was announced that John Bolton was going to be in his administration. So, I didn't really have a plan for this broadcast. This is my first time ever doing this, and I mainly just wanted to see how easy it would be to jump on and do some commentary on YouTube or some other streaming platform when I'm really upset about something like today. So, if you guys want me to do this again, I will, but it probably isn't going to be something like a long form like Media Roots Radio. This is just going to be more me off the cuff, just deciding, after I've seen something, some awful news breaking, to come and jump on and do this in real time. And I probably won't do it in a consistent way or on a regular schedule. So probably the best way to find out if I'm doing this is to follow me on Twitter or Facebook right now. And I guess I'm just struck by the fact that not only are we in a new Cold War, psychologically speaking, and the way that this is just turning everybody into jingoistic, xenophobic monsters all over again, in a way that I didn't even think really was around during the 1980s. I mean, this possibly, in my mind, seems like it could be worse, just in terms of the psychology of this country. I understand, Jennifer. I don't know. I don't see how anybody right now can't be sort of falling back on vices or things that we've all agreed to stop doing and lead healthier lifestyles. I mean, right now is a real test to see if those New Year's resolutions could hold up. For me, they're not personally holding up, so I feel you there. Someone from the chat says, "I don't think Assad ordered the attack. There was no reason to." Yeah, I largely agree with that. And this whole time it's been sort of presumed that the rebels are doing this, and it's not Assad. And I guess one of the things that comes to mind, especially for this most recent incident, is we've been told that it's chlorine gas. It's not sarin gas. The very first alleged chemical weapons incident in Syria was never proven to be sarin either. And that's something that I don't think most people realize, is that there was never any forensic evidence provided proving that it was sarin gas in the first place. Now, sarin gas, of course, would be an immediate trademark, or, at least some kind of evidence that it's a state actor of some kind. It's not just some ragtag rebel group. But it was never actually proven to be sarin. Seymour Hersh did a pretty in-depth report about this that Harper's Magazine refused to run. And I'm not actually sure who ended up running that article, but you can read the Seymour Hersh report in full. And what's also strange to me is there's not really a consistent portrayal of exactly how are these munitions being launched. Are they being launched from planes? Was it a chemical weapon munition of some kind? I've seen some Twitter pictures coming up on my feed showing like an alleged chemical weapons munition that like had broken someone's bed in someone's house, and this like kid was wearing a gas mask next to it. But I mean, if that's a real picture of what just happened, I mean, couldn't we look at the identifying markers on that munition and see exactly what it is? Um, it's just all very vague and confusing once again. And of course, you should always be skeptical when people come out and say, we have proof that Assad did this, that Assad is killing his own people again with chemical weapons, with no evidence behind it. I mean, it's different. And I'm not like an Assad apologist necessarily. And I hate using a phrase like that. It makes me sound like I'm some kind of neocon piece of shit calling, referring to people as Saddam apologists. Um, every time I see people use this term Assadist, who are especially people on the left, I'm wondering, did they also call people who oppose the Iraq war Saddamists? It just seems like such a disingenuous, shitty way to debate with someone about what's going on right now. But that aside, uh, obviously Assad would have had very little motivation for doing this. And even if he wanted to punish his own people somehow as a response to something, why would he use chemical weapons? Um, we know that chemical weapons are not effective weapons. Um, it just does not make sense to me personally. Um, but at the same time, like, I'm willing to look at evidence, and if I see some evidence that somehow these munitions were from Assad, or that there's video footage of them launching it, then maybe sure. But it's every single time this happens, we're not shown any evidence. And here's the sad part: the best evidence that sort of the establishment has that Assad launched a chemical weapons attack many years ago against his own people is from fucking Bellingcat. I mean, think about that for a second. That's pathetic. An Atlantic Council sort of crowdsourced, photo analyst who doesn't even have any photo forensic ability was the one to essentially prove to the skeptical world that Assad launched a chemical weapons attack against his own people. Very, very strange. And if you don't remember that, that's how Bellingcat actually became famous in the first place and came onto the scene. See, Ernesto Cruz says, and they always blame the SAA. Is that short for the Syrian army? I don't know what the SAA is. Maybe you can answer that for me, Ernesto. Somebody says, I wouldn't discount the idea that some dumbass field commander launched the attack to avenge heavy losses. I mean, I'm never, I won't discount any possibility. But again, I go back to this idea of why chemical weapons? Why not just launch like a bomb or a missile strike, or go shoot, a town up as a form of punishment? Why chemical weapons is like some kind of form of punishment? It seems strange. It just seems very strange to me. They're not effective weapons. There's a reason why chemical weapons are hardly used in war. But it kind of reminds me of the Salisbury poisoning incident. I don't know who did it. I'm not as interested in speculating about who did it as I am in debunking the UK's narrative on what happened there. And I think that's important to do here. We shouldn't get ahead of ourselves, in my opinion, and speculate who did this and make that the primary sort of argument about Assad or about these alleged attacks. Now, I understand people rushing to the false flag narrative. We don't necessarily know. I think it's a little bit inaccurate, because even if it was somebody doing it falsely under the name of Assad, we still haven't even seen evidence of that being the case, that it was done by somebody trying to frame Assad. So what I'm saying is, we don't know how many groups or rebels are operating with chemical weapons in Syria, or chlorine, or whatever this was allegedly. But I think that it requires more information to even be able to make the call that this is an attempted false flag, or that it might be a false, even to say it might be a false flag. Because I think that what's happening here is the world narrative, sort of like the neoliberal and mainstream media narratives, will fill in the holes. If a chemical weapons attack happens in Syria and nobody's identified as being behind it, they'll just automatically say it's Assad. So if you want to call it a false flag, since we have so little information, you could almost say more accurately that it's sort of a media false flag, that the media just automatically fills in this information and just says, well, it's obviously Assad. And I feel like in this instance and many other instances in the past, the media, the think tankers, the pundits, they do this even before the US government officially releases a statement. And I think that that's important too. Someone says, was it Obama? I don't know if they're talking about the attack. I'm not sure what they're actually asking. Um so yeah, I'm just gonna wait a second to see if anybody has any questions for me. And I'm probably only gonna be doing this for, I don't know, 15 more minutes or so. John Gold, are you still there? My buddy John Gold is in the chat. Ernesto asks, what's the ultimate objective here? Regime change has failed. Assad is winning. What would the US get from a war with Russia and Syria? Well, that's a really good question. I think that I'll disagree with just one part of what you say, that I don't know if regime change has failed. I mean, go back to the red line that Obama announced. He decided not to launch a full-scale invasion and military assault on Syria. That hasn't even been attempted yet by the U.S. So, in terms of regime change failing, I can't say that we've actually fully we haven't swung for the fences yet, so to speak. So if this ends up culminating in a mass airstrike tonight, then I guess this will be our first real taste of what it will be like when the U.S. gets closer to the idea of regime change. But I think that's a valid question to ask: is what is the objective here? Is this more as a sort of a psychological game with Russia to try to psych them out and to see if they'll be willing to back down in Syria in a way that where we actually could perform regime change? There were people floating around this idea in DC for a while that they wanted to see if maybe Russia could negotiate with us to get Assad to step down, to somehow convince him to step down on his own. That was, this other sort of alternate theory. Obviously, that's not going to happen, especially not now. I don't know what the U.S. would get out of having a war with Russia, an actual war. I know what the U.S. is already getting out of having a sort of a psychological and info war with Russia. It's the same thing they got out of the original Cold War. So, but in terms of having a real war, I feel like a lot of the people in charge are willing to take the risk that, well, we're more powerful, so Russia better back down. And I do think that is a prevailing mindset among sort of the DC class and sort of the people in the military, is they truly believe that that Russia will blink if we show them the full might of our power. And I think that's a obviously very risky calculation. But this is sort of, when you really boil it down, Ernesto, I think that this is what it's mostly about. Is I think they are willing to take an extreme risk and show Russia how sort of strong, and I don't mean that in a positive way, but just what we're willing to do to get what we want. Because what Obama did is he sort of signaled to Putin and other people that actually maybe there's a chance that the U.S. could change its mind at the last minute and decide not to invade a country, and work with the leader of another country who has an invested interest in it to remove chemical weapons or whatever that facade was all about. I'm not saying that Obama um, did something noble there, but on some level it did signal that the US is willing to, is willing to negotiate. They're not, as tough as nails to the point where they're going to fucking barrel into Syria regardless of the Russian presence there and just do whatever the hell they want. But I think now the shift is coming back to that sort of American hegemony mindset where that is the primary thing. And unlike the Cold War, this is sort of an untested battlefield. We don't know what this will be like. If we decide to launch, let's just say, for example, we decide to launch airstrikes in Syria tonight, and a few Russian jets get caught in the middle, or start maybe even shooting at one of our planes or something. Obviously, that can heat up very quickly here. Somebody says they're getting serious lag. Yeah, if anybody else is getting lag, let me know. My internet connection is not the best here, so it could just be that. But okay, someone says no lag here. Okay, well, sorry, J Doll Music. I think it might be your connection, or maybe try refreshing the page or something. Try just maybe reopening your web browser. Someone says Bolton ultimate objective, as he said, is to overthrow Iran before 2019. He's trying to get Iran to officially step in the defense of Syria so they can also attack it directly. That is, I think that's an incredibly savvy observation. And that's really what I think might be happening here is I think that if it really comes down to it, I don't know if Russia will really be willing to fall on its own sword for Iran or Syria in the end. And I know it doesn't seem that way right now, but I do think that this thing with Bolton wanting to get to Iran is obviously playing a huge role in this. And he's already said, along with people like James Woolsey and some of the other outlier neocons who support Trump, because remember, it's not just all the neocons against Trump. We know that now Elliot Abrams, John Bolton, James Woolsey, William Bennett, Michael Ledeen, these are all PNAC signatories, and people who are very heavily involved in PNAC are all very strong supporters of Trump. They all wanted to, as they described it, cut the head off the snake and perform regime change in Iran as a means to perform regime change in Syria. So they believe that by toppling the government of Iran, that Syria would go down with it. And that's obviously a horrible calculation as well. But I think that the earlier commenter might be onto something, is that this can be a way to draw Iran into what we can characterize as an offensive posture towards us, even though this is how we always do shit. It's never really as it seems, but to the rest of the world, it will seem like, if Iran starts firing at Israeli troops or Israeli planes or, our planes or our aircraft carrier or something like that, I mean, that's all it's going to take. It's if they fire even a single shot out of us firing millions of shots in their direction, that's all it'll take for the neocons in Israel and the United States to be like, okay, now the shit's on. Iran just attacked us. It's the old classic, the John Wayne, Bill Hicks routine, where John Wayne is, playing the sheriff, telling the guy to pick up the gun on the ground. It's the same mentality. Just looking at some more of the comments here. No, this is not just tobacco. Weed is now legal in California, in case you're wondering. I'm no longer breaking any state laws because I do not have a medical condition. But I am breaking federal law right now. MKO. In DACA, I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with the acronym MKO. I am very familiar with the MEK, Um, so I'm gonna look that up while I'm still doing this. Thanks, Stoner Socialist. Um, Jonathan K. Everyone in government supports Israel, John Cold said. What about why'd you mention Jonathan K, John? Are you still there, buddy? Well, Jod is absolutely right. Not Jod Gold, different Jod from the chat. He says it's just so obviously sketchy that after every one of these chemical attacks, there's a rush to judgment without an investigation and conclusive evidence. Of course. Well, sorry. It's kind of like kind of reminds me of MH17. I feel like that might have been the first time I really saw this type of machinery. Well, no, I guess we could take it back to the first chemical weapons incident, but I guess the larger thing is this time they are not just trying to blame Assad for this. There's something new. It's being floated again, and it's trying to, designed to egg on Trump and to try to make him feel, to try to pull him into this narrative. And I'm not saying that Trump is standing in the way of this happening necessarily, because it seems like he's kind of fully on board at this point. But it does seem like the media is trying something new this time where they're like, well, now we have to like blame Putin directly for this because he just launched a chemical weapons attack in the UK, to try to assassinate these, the Skripals, or however you pronounce their name. So now this is really playing into that, where it's like the UK government, Theresa May, several people in the UK government basically accused Russia and Putin of launching a chemical weapons terrorist attack in their country. So this following so soon after that, the timing, it just does seem really sketchy to me. And now they're trying to spin it more than they have in the past, that Putin is effectively responsible for this chemical weapons attack. And Trump stupidly played into that when asked by a reporter if Putin or Russia is to blame for this. And he's like, yeah, maybe. Yeah, we'll see. Something like that. I mean, you could pull up the actual quote. There's a really long statement where Trump is mostly just fuming about Michael Cohen being arrested and raided recently. But in there, he throws in something about how he might, punish Putin or Russia for this chemical weapons attack. D Bang says, do you predict the U.S. will strike Syria in the next 24 to 48 hours, Robbie? Yes, I absolutely do. I think there's very low chance that we will not attack them tonight. I mean, tonight. I would say in the next 12 hours, unfortunately. Oh, USS Donald Cook is not an aircraft carrier. Thank you for the correction. I don't know why I assumed it was. David, what kind of ship is it? If you can maybe specify in the chat so I can let the listeners know who might not be following the chat right now. They would be dead if they were poisoned with Novichok, says Ernesto. Well, absolutely. I just did an interview with Tom Secker of Spy Culture about this subject for Media Roots, and I didn't know until talking to him that Novichok is supposed to be 5 to 10 times more powerful and more deadly than sarin nerve gas. A lot of people in World War I didn't even survive a mustard gas attack. Sarin gas is more deadly than that. I haven't heard of people surviving a sarin gas attack that was directly targeted at them. That is unheard of. Um, so yeah, if it was actually Novichok, they would be dead. And apparently they've survived with no lasting permanent damage whatsoever. So that is extremely unbelievable to me, that whole story. Um, let's see, look at some other questions here. It's the USS Donald Cook, Robert. And he just described it as a guided missile destroyer. So I guess that's more in line. Yeah, USS Donald Cole has tomahawks, says Thor Socks. That's more in line with, I think, what the previous airstrike was in Syria. So I guess that makes me feel a little bit better that it's not an aircraft carrier. Um, but still, I mean, it's still very scary. You know, I don't know what to think, but I do think it's very likely that we are going to strike Syria in the next 12 hours in some form, and it could just be Tomahawk missiles. Joe Babbitt says that's not new. They blame Putin for chemical attacks last year. Especially MSNBC always makes a point to include Putin in blame for everything. And Joe Babbitt also wants me to take a dab, apparently. I don't have the ability to do that, Joe. I am more of a spliff man. But yeah, I would agree with Joe. I think that that's correct. The only reason it felt different to me this time is because they got Trump to answer to that proposal, if he would consider blaming Putin for this attack. Um, John Gold wants me to stop smoking because he's trying to quit. I'm sorry, John. I can't do that right now. Um, Ernesto Cruz, how do Americans feel about this possible escalation? Are they scared? Do they not care? What's the general mood regarding all that? I think that's a really good question because I'm turning on TV right now. I'm on Twitter looking just at the general feeds. Um, it seems like most people don't even know what's happening, and most people are unaware of how close this is getting to a major confrontation. And even the people who are very aware of what's going on, I think a lot of them, many of them, have been fatigued by us sitting on the edge of World War III for so goddamn long. Um, I mean, think about how long it's been since. I mean, I put a clip in a very heavy agenda, part 3, about showing all several news clips showing how scared they were of, Russian jets buzzing American planes or American jets in Syria, or different, battleships around the ocean. And that was like, God, like 2 years ago now. So I think a lot of people are fatigued from it. The people who are paying attention are fatigued from it. And then the people who know, who sort of really sat in this sort of apocalyptic mindset for too long, I think some of them have gone stir crazy too. I mean, Paul Craig Roberts has had some good commentary, but I mean, if you listen to him for the past year, it's just nonstop talk about how we're all going to be nuked. We're all dead. It's like, it sounds like he's, you know, Sarah Connor in Terminator 2 or something. I mean, it's uh, really depressing to listen to. But again, I don't think he's necessarily being hyperbolic. Um, I've gotten into arguments with people on the left who think that talking about World War III too much right now is hyperbolic, and that the real, inflection point is going to be Iran or North Korea. But I mean, to me, both of those scenarios could lead to World War III too. There's a reason why we waited so long to go after Syria and Iran. There's a reason. We have been thinking about this very long term. The PNAC people, the neocons, the war makers, they waited to go after Syria and Iran until the end. There's a reason for that. They knew that it would start to heat things up. Um, and I don't know if their goal was to get us into some kind of World War III like scenario. Um, but it obviously could, poses that risk. I mean, North Korea alone, if China got involved in that, John Vaja says Brian Williams is salivating about tomahawks right now. What a fucking psychopath. He quoted Leonard Cohen lyrics last time when there was an actual tomahawk missile strike on Syria. So Holden says, correction, Brian Williams is furiously masturbating to the mere prospect of launching tomahawk missiles. I know, Ernesto, it is depressing. It is very depressing. I feel like the whole time this has been happening, this building paranoia towards Russia, a lot of regular people who don't watch the news don't seem to bat an eyelash towards it at all. They don't even know that it's going on. And then really unfortunately, it's mostly Democrats and people who are left of center, like generic Democrats who are concerned about this, but they're not concerned about it for the right reasons. Like if you talk to them right now, they'll probably tell you, Trump should teach Assad a lesson, teach Putin a lesson. I mean, they'd be coming from it from the perspective of that Trump should actually go harder on Syria. So it doesn't leave us with that many people who are actually like pushing back on this. Ernesto, no, there is not an active, coherent anti-war movement or opposition in the U.S. I think that era is over after sort of the endless post 9/11 wars. I think the last genuinely big anti-war protest we're going to see is Iraq. Maybe if there's a draft in this country, like if we go to war with North Korea, we're not going to see any protests for that war of a sizable nature unless they're promoted by resistance Democrats who are cynically using it as an opportunity to put more heat on Trump again. So, unfortunately, if we went to war with North Korea, I think it would actually take a draft in that instance for serious anti-war protests to start happening around the country. Yes, I hope he gets drafted too, Ernesto. I really hope he does. But unfortunately, he's probably too old to get drafted by now. I was making a joke to someone today that I'd go full Bill Cooper if I got drafted, and I would refuse to serve. I was kind of joking, but I wasn't entirely joking. Well, Paul Craig Roberts, I mean, he's not wrong on a lot of this Russia stuff. I just think listening to him is hard because it's like, I get it. We're really close to killing everybody on this planet right now. But I guess I would prefer a little bit more of a calm approach to discussing that subject. Even though I know it's it's a terrible, horrifying thing to think about. It's hard to be calm about it and discuss the different facets of it. No, I know Bill Cooper was a lot more than a draft dodger. Let's see. John Gold says they've managed to avoid the draft with multiple tours and mercenaries like Blackwater. That's absolutely correct. And just a side note to that, well, I guess first I'll say my only counter argument to that is if it was another full scale war, they would not be able to come up with enough contractors soon enough to fight a full ground war like with North Korea. And I don't think we'd have enough soldiers to be willing to fill that role either. But I read something interesting lately about the mercenaries that were in Iraq, and apparently there's actually no consistent count of the amount of contractors that were killed in Iraq. that it's debatable how many were killed. Apparently, somehow, yeah, there's a gulf of there's a range of the amount that were apparently killed. So that's interesting. Um, Holden McGroin is not wrong. If it's an anti-war movement having to do with like Russia or Syria, not wanting to go to war in Syria, with Russia by their side, I do think people, and the resistance movement would say that it was Kremlin infiltrated or it was some kind of um, Russian operation, or even say it's a right wing platform or it's something the alt right cares about. Um, we've already seen them trying to present the hands off Syria movement as just a alt right thing or conservative thing in the mainstream media. Hannah D. What if Trump is deluded that he can talk his way out of World War III in Syria, Iran with the Russians? I mean, yeah, I think that's quite possible. But that's what all these neocons. Um, I mean, all these neocons are deluded into thinking that Russia uh, needs to be stood up to in the sense that we can invade Iran and Syria if we want to, if we need to, and they can't do a goddamn thing about it. So yeah, like I do think the prevailing mindset in DC is that with someone like John Bolton now by his side trying to influence him, I think that's very likely, unfortunately, that that's what these American power mongers think. What would happen if Mueller was fired? Um, Hard to say. If it happened after we were already embroiled in another full blown war, uh, I don't think it would take Trump down. I don't think the Republicans, enough of them would get behind impeachment efforts. If it happened now, maybe enough Republicans would flip on him and vote for impeachment. Maybe. But even if that happened now, I don't know I really don't know. I think he could still get away with it. I mean, we're talking about Trump here. Somehow Trump has nothing has stuck to him. He had his lawyer pay off a porn star that he had an affair with right before the election to get her to keep quiet. And somehow that didn't come out during the election, didn't come out right afterwards. It came out now and it doesn't seem to be having any effect. I mean, unless this um, you know, Michael Cohen raid is about that. It just nothing sticks to this guy. Robbie couldn't bring attention to anthrax anymore. What are you talking about, John? I don't know what that means. Joe Babbitt, no, I don't. I'm not going to charge for any of these. If you want to donate to Media Roots Radio on Patreon, you can, and we would really appreciate that. That goes to me and Abby, and we don't charge for anything specifically that we put out with Media Roots, or I'm not going to charge with this. The only thing I'm still charging for is my film, but that's it. So yeah, none of this stuff's going to be held hostage um, through a paywall like that. Um, so I think I'm going to wrap up now. I think I'm going to wrap up now, but it was nice trying this for the first time. And I will announce it when I'm about to do one. Okay. Have a good night, everybody.